Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacalyn. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacalyn at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome. Yes, the doctor is in. You are watching USA Global TV, home of Talking Heads, or maybe you're listening on Business Talk Radio out of New York. And hello to our friend Chris there. We are so happy to have you for our 70th episode of the Business Talk Show. And why is that possible? Because of this man, my friend, incredible co-host and partner, Mr. Al Cini. Welcome, Al.
Let's bring him out. Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn. I appreciate that. And that's the first time I've heard my voiceover on your intro there.
What did you think?
I'm scared. I'm a little frightened. I sound better than I thought. So thanks for. It's really just a pleasure working with you on everything that's USA Global TV.
Yes, thank you. And it is such a pleasure to work with you. As I mentioned, this is our 70th episode of doing this show together, Al. Do you believe it?
No, it feels like we just started yesterday. And they've been 70 great episodes, by the way.
Really have. And a lot of that has to do with the incredible questions that you have for our guests. We've got a wonderful guest today who is going to bring us a lot of information about publishing and how to publish, when to publish, what to publish, what publishing costs look like, etc. But before we bring Anne out, I'm going to spotlight you, and I want you to share with us the work that you are doing. You have your own shows, and you also are really helping businesses to get all their people rowing in the same direction, or really building that culture of oneness. So please tell us about what you are doing, Al.
Well, thanks for the opportunity as always. And I try to change it up a little bit every time. This will be the 70th alternative version of the answer to your question. I don't know where to begin. I'm going to begin this with a confession. What I do for a living is apply a process that we've been developing over the last several years that make it possible for an organization to align itself and its people with the purpose it serves. What we found in our experience is that all the important OKRs, KPIs, whatever you want to call them, all the important numbers are improved when people are committed to the purpose of the organization rather than just focused on their own careers or competing with each other. It's not a hard exercise. It's a simple exercise. It's science-based. We call it the Brand and Culture Alignment Toolkit, and it's a 3-step process, and we can do it for anybody, anywhere, as long as they speak English. I think next year is the year we translate to another language or 2 or 30. But this year it's English. And here's my confession. We can go back to our 2-shot, and I'll confess to you. This is embarrassing. I think there's a book in what I do. I really do. And I keep thinking every now and then I ought to write a book. And I have people in my life, such as you, who will say things like, why don't you write a book? And I never get around to it. And that is exactly where Anne comes in, our guest today. And that's why this is going to be such a great conversation.
Well, the world is waiting for a book from Mr. Al Cini, that is for sure. So we're going to get Anne out here. We do have a couple of comments. And the first is from Hamid Midelt. I hope I said that correctly. Hello. I don't think you've watched or commented before. Nice to have you. Welcome. And someone else, Valeria Lawrence. This must be for you, Al. You are so beautiful. Great show.
Yeah, sure. That's for me.
Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And we love the comments. All right. So let's bring out our guest. Anne, we'll give you a little introduction here, but we've got Anne Louise O'Connell. And Anne, you were, I think, connected with us through a very dear friend, Miss Diane Floyd Bain.
There it is.
There it is. Yes. Diane is the connector. She is unbelievable. She knows people all across the world, and she really is so open and just bringing people together. So thank you for joining us here today, Anne.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And if I had all of Diane's books that we published together there, it would just spill off the side. So I just picked the most recent one.
Yes, Rise, a Girl Struggle for More. So, Anne, how did you get started in the publishing industry?
Oh my goodness. Do you want the Reader's Digest version or the long version? um, I've been writing all my life, as most authors will tell you. My profession prior to getting into publishing was PR and marketing, community relations, and things of that nature. So I wrote for a living. When I moved to Dubai, I decided I wanted to change things up a little bit. So I started freelancing. So became a copywriter. In Dubai, worked internationally. I also did some consulting and social media work and things like that. And at the time, I was writing about living in Dubai, and I met a publisher from the UK. And it just our relationship sort of grew. We did some workshops together. And we decided that I would write a book called At Home in Dubai. It was traditionally published by Summertime Publishing, the publisher that I met. I loved the process. And simultaneously, I was also working on my first novel, which didn't really start as a novel. It started as trying to understand what I was going through in perimenopause. So I was writing about that and thinking, I should start a blog. And I'm like, oh, no, I can't do that. So fast forward from Dubai, I moved to Thailand and was trying to decide what to do. And when I learned something, I like to teach it. So I started coaching other people. I had started studying the whole publishing realm. I did contact some agents to get my novel published, but I wound up self-publishing. So again, fast forward to 2016, I moved back to Canada, which is where I am now, and decided to formalize what I was doing and started OC Publishing. So that is the nutshell, believe it or not.
Right. That's good.
Wow. Well, I love all the travels.
It's, sometimes you got to travel all over the place to land where you need to be.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. 22 years as an expat, but that's where I met Diane in Dubai and a lot of other wonderful people. So I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I'm very happy to be back in Canada right now.
A great story. And I'm glad we met you through Diane. So thank you, Diane, for offering this introduction. And you know that I've given my confession and that I'm a procrastinator. So I have this book idea bubbling inside of me. Problem is, it's not going anywhere. It's just bubbling inside of me. It's got to be poured out. It's got to be molded and shaped. There's a whole bunch of cooking left to do. And so there are two ways you can help me. One way is as a coach. You mentioned in our discussion before the program that you'll coach people through the process of developing a book, and that could be any genre. It doesn't have to be what you publish in your publishing company.
That's correct.
Why don't we start with how you can help people as a coach to develop a book idea and create a product from it, and then we'll move into your publishing work.
Sure. It's interesting. Everybody I talk to says they want to write a book, and I honestly believe that everybody has a book in them. And writing is a skill. Some come by it naturally, but it is something that can be learned. And the most important thing is to read a lot in the genre that you want to write. So, all of my authors that I work with, I'm working on multiple projects. So when they say to me, oh my gosh, Anne, I have an idea for a book. My first piece of advice to anybody is just start writing. Start writing. Do a mind dump. You don't have to put parameters around it in the very, very beginning. Just dump it all. Just get it on the page. And as I said, the more you read in the genre that you want to write in, whether it's a business book or a fiction or a memoir, the more you'll get an idea of what your own voice might sound like and how to start putting it together. I always say that I'll start mentoring somebody even from the idea stage. So sometimes all it takes is just talking it out. So, whether it's with a professional, like an author, a fellow author or writer, or somebody who coaches like I do, just to say it out loud and start bouncing ideas around is really a great start. And then if I'm working with somebody on an ongoing basis, then we formalize the process a little bit. And then we go by chapter. So, we'll top line it and say, what is the theme? What are some of the underlying threads? Let's, cobble together a bit of a chapter outline, no matter what genre it is. And then go away, write a chapter. And then we come together and then we hone in on the things that might need a little more work. Oftentimes, somebody really gets it and is really excited about it and then is off and running. So maybe 3 sessions, 4 sessions or whatever. And others prefer to have me do what I call a manuscript mentoring, so that I would be involved in the process from chapter 1 through to the end.
I know Dr. Jacalyn's, you're writing another book, Dr. Jacalyn, which I think is amazing. And your first book was amazing, and especially considering how quickly you assembled it. So there are a couple of things, and efficiently, you did a great job in a very short period of time. When you set your mind to doing something, you can get it done. But the trick, I think, as Anne said, is to start somewhere, throw some words down. But then if you're working with a coach like Anne, you can start shaping the result immediately, get immediate feedback, and your energy is then drawn from that relationship with your coach, which means everything goes much more quickly because you've got somebody holding you accountable. Copy by Friday, got to have edits by Monday. And, and instead of doing all the other things that are not the book, you have to do the book. I mean, Anne, do I have that right? Because
absolutely,
keeping me on track would be a big part of your job.
Absolutely. And, I'm a bit of a gentle touch. Some people need more, I'm holding your feet to the fire. But my approach is more, I'm here for you whenever you're ready for me. But once we start rolling, let's get those sessions scheduled. So then you have a timeline. So if we're going to meet once a month, then I want to see 3 chapters like 3 days before we have our session. Because if I don't have those chapters, then we don't have anything to talk about. Unless if you're stuck and you say, oh my gosh, I really don't know where to go with this. Then maybe we have a discussion about what it is. Are you having trouble with the voice? Are you having trouble with the point of view or the perspective? Do you need to do some research? Like with historical fiction and, with Diane's book, she did a lot of research and interviewed people and went to Drumright and Oilton and visited museums and things of that nature. So oftentimes, like, I don't believe there's any such thing as writer's block. I might get a whole bunch of tomatoes thrown at me right now, but I think it just means that you got to take a step back and maybe do a little research. Maybe, your character isn't fleshed out enough, or, if you're writing a business book or a self-help book, maybe you need to talk to a colleague and interview them and just, shake out the cobwebs a little bit. So yeah, it's important to have a committed timeline. But I believe that people write when they're ready.
Well, and the process starts when they're ready. But Dr. Jacalyn, that's not how it worked with you. I mean, you dove into it.
He was ready.
And then after that, I mean, by the way, I do want to say
ready.
You mentioned, Anne, that you have a gentle touch, and so does Dr. Jacalyn. I kind of work for her on some projects, but you've got something going for you that I don't think you really appreciate, and that's the power over men writers who have a fundamental fear of women. You may not appreciate that, but I think I'm representative of a lot of men who are afraid of letting women down. So when you make a promise to a woman, it has more weight, I think, than when you make a promise to one of the other guys. And just throwing that out there. It's gender specific, but
that's what gets you motivated.
Yes.
Well, it's a reason to work with a coach like that. Another reason.
Yeah, and I would say that most people are afraid of letting someone else down. And funny enough, all of the authors that I'm working with right now are all female. And that's not by design or by target, but it might be because of the genres, but I publish mystery as well. I've coached. One of my coaching clients is in real estate, and he published a book about, how to be a landlord. My very first self-publishing coachee was a fellow who I coached when I was living in Thailand. So anyway, I don't think any of us like to let people down, male or female.
There's a lot of power in that. And
Yes, there is.
What was it like writing your book?
Well, I think I finished the book in 3 months, and the second book is also finished, but I decided to add another chapter to it. So I think that'll be done this weekend. But it's in both cases, at some point it felt like it was work. I felt like I just want to get it finished. Yeah. Okay. I just want to get done with this so I can move on to the next thing. Yeah. But Anne, a question I have for you, because I never thought about this for the first book, but for the second book, I am really thinking about it. And it might sound completely crazy, but we have to have goals, objectives. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that you should be writing if you want to be on the New York Times bestseller list as opposed to being on the Amazon, new release or bestseller list, or does it not matter whatsoever?
Great question.
That is a really good question. And I'm trying to think, there's a fellow named Tim Grahl who does an amazing series of writing workshops and marketing workshops. And he actually did one fairly recently on what it takes to get on the New York Times bestseller list. But the bottom line is there's really not a whole lot you can do to make sure. And I don't believe that self-published books even get on the radar. So, and I've never had a book on the New York Times bestseller list. So it's a hard question to answer. What I can tell you is that authors who write more than one book, who continue to write series of books, who start to develop a following, who have, a decent platform before they even launch their first book, are going to, get the momentum going. I believe and I could be wrong, but from what I remember from Tim's workshop, I believe that it's bookstore sales that are what's measured for that particular list. There were some, big lists that went beyond that. So
interesting. Thank you. We're going to take a break, but I think if anybody's out there, whether you're watching on the live or you watch on the replay, if you can put in the comments, if you are a New York Times best-selling author and you have any tips that you can share with us, if there's anyone out there like that, we'd love to know, because I think it's good to have goals. And I think you're right. I think if it's on Amazon and that's where the only place that it is, you have no shot. It has to be in bookstores where people can actually, and I think there's a certain amount of time that you have to sell so many copies. Yeah. Does that sound right?
It rotates. Yeah. So that changes almost from minute to minute.
Wow.
Interesting.
Great interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. We're going to take a very short. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to hear from someone we know and love. Okay. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
The session that we had with BCAT was really entertaining and enlightening. We were able to put together some very specific steps that we as individuals can take, and it was really fun to all come together and see sort of where we're going as a team and how we can all get there together.
We had a tremendous experience with the BCAT partners. One of the challenges that we have as an organization is to make sure that we have the right people in the right chairs doing the right thing. To do that well, you have to have synergy. You can try to dream up ways to make sure that your group does that, or you can rely on experts. We would recommend BCAT partners to anybody who's looking to take their organization to the next level.
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Story Garden. Your host, Diane Boehm. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Diane Floyd Boehm tells wonderful stories that warm the heart, spark the imagination, and unite people and families across generations. For children, Diane's Harry the Camel connects with all of us who've ever wondered how different our lives might have been if only we'd been born something better, like a wonderful horse instead of an ordinary camel. In the end, we all learn along with Harry that there's nothing better than just being yourself. Diane's Little Girl in the Moon looks down on earthbound children and wonders if they know she's just like them. A story of love, home, and the bond between mother and daughter, its powerful theme that we're each of us different yet all of us the same plants a seed in children that promises to blossom within a loving and trusting grown-up. Diane's new biography, Rise, recounts the experiences of her grandmother, Ruby, to reveal the hidden strength of the human spirit. Ruby's story inspires all of us to become the best versions of ourselves. You'll find all of Diane's delightful books and much more at dianefloydboehm.com. Visit dianefloydboehm.com. That's dianefloydboehm.com.
Because I've written a couple of novels. Those are the only mystery books so far that I would include in the under the umbrella. But I started publishing genres that I like to read, and also that I'm passionate about. In my life before I was in public relations and marketing, I was a preschool teacher. So I love children's literature. And today is actually, if I might, December 1st is launch day for Timothy Titus Terence O'Toole and the Dragon, which is out today, written by an author who sadly passed away in September, Jackie Arneson. But it's the second children's book that we published. So we're very, very pleased with the support of her family to be able to continue getting her stories out and honoring her legacy. So children's books I love, so children's picture books. Diane's book was the first young adult historical fiction, biographical historical fiction. So that's quite a mix of genres. That I also published memoir and women's fiction. So, and I unfortunately haven't been able to carve out much time for my own writing, but I do have a series planned that will spring from my last novel. So it'll be a mystery, cozy mystery series.
Oh, that's great.
Fantastic. And a question that I have for you, we talked about the writing piece. We talked about when Al starts to write and how he could work with you as a coach. And I'd also like to talk about options for publishing. We briefly touched on self-publishing. I know there's a hybrid model. There's working directly with a publisher like yourself. So if you can go through a little of those, and then after that, we can talk about the pros and cons, but just the definition right now would be great.
Sure. The model that I use, you made reference to it as a hybrid model. which I also refer to as partner publishing. It's a model, it's a shared cost model. Traditional publishing, of course, is what a lot of people are very familiar with. And it's a model where, the author submits the manuscript and then basically is involved in the process, but the traditional publisher covers all of the costs and then, sends out the royalties. Self-publishing is when an author takes on the whole process themselves. So the author would, identify the editors, find an illustrator if they need one, take care of book layout and design, do the title setup, set up distribution, do the pricing. So all of those things, when you self-publish, you have to organize that yourself. So, but as a partner publisher, I take the reins in that, but keep the author informed and involved in every step of the way.
That's great to know. And before the program, we talked about, I think, that last step before you reach the summit that a lot of people kind of miss
Yes.
and find themselves laying flat on their backs at the bottom of the mountain. And that is promotion of the material. How are you going to get the world has to know that you did this?
Yeah.
And often it's the author that has to come up with a plan for doing that. Isn't that right?
The author does take on the lion's share of marketing and promotions, and that's in whatever model of publishing. Traditional publishers, of course, have a broader reach distribution-wise. Although a caveat to that, the model that I use in self-publishing, you can access the same channels, but you might not have the same two-way, like push-pull. So, a retailer is waiting for the next Simon & Schuster or Random House title, whereas we can make a title available, but, the bookstore may or may not find it or have access to it. So, I'll backpedal a little bit with the book promotions. It's critical, no matter what model of publishing that you choose, that you understand what goes into getting a book in front of the eyeballs of the people you want to read it. So it could be, you can use your social media platform because, of course, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's, as you establish your platform, you want to make sure that you have, followers and people who are watching what you're doing before you launch your book. If it's a business book and you're doing workshops or training programs, that is in essence, if you're not published by a traditional publisher, that'll be probably the bulk of your sales. And most of my authors, the experience that they've had and what I've had is that the most sales are in-person situations. And that's not to say there's always, exceptions to every rule. And so, it's really important just to be looking at ways that you're going to get your message out that is interesting, that's engaging, and that's not, overwhelming or obnoxious, if I can say that.
Thanks, Anne. A question I have, let's suppose that Mr. Cini decides to go directly with the publisher, not a hybrid and not self-published. Does that necessarily mean that book is going to be picked up by a publisher, that manuscript?
If what you're asking me is if he decides he wants to go the hybrid or the traditional?
No, direct. He wants traditional. He wants to go traditional to a publisher.
Okay. There's no guarantee. And, they have what's called a slush pile. So any acquisitions editor, and this is just from talking to people and my limited knowledge, because, I did have a book published traditionally way back, but it was in the UK. So my understanding is in a traditional model, they might have 200 manuscripts, and of the 200 that sit in the slush pile in that week, one or two might make it through to the next level. Competition is fierce. The big publishers, the big five, require an agent. But some of the medium size and smaller size these days are very open to authors approaching them. So there's a lot of indie presses that exist. the most important thing is to do your research, find out what they're looking for in a submission, an inquiry for publishing, and give them what they're asking for. So if it's just for most, they want like the first couple of chapters or a synopsis. And if that's what they ask for, don't send them the entire book. If they want it electronically, don't mail it. Of course, we don't use mail much these days. And find the publisher who publishes your genre. And it's something as easy as walking into a bookstore, going to that bookshelf of the genre that you write and looking on the copyright page and seeing who the publisher is. So, if you're going to be writing the next, great mystery, go to the mystery aisle and look in the book. If you're writing a business book, go to the business aisle of the bookstore and look. I mean, you can do that on Amazon as well. Just do a quick search. And then it's always in the specs of the book that tells you, what category, how many pages, and it always has the publisher as well.
That's great advice.
That's
right
good
there.
advice. A follow-up question that I have to that is, let's say I finished my book and ready to go, and I know someone famous, not A list, but maybe I know a B or C list. Well, if I have them write a foreword or something else in the book, will that help me get my book published traditionally, or doesn't matter?
It depends on how famous. I mean, for the
Well, I know Cini, so.
Yes, for the big five. I mean, to really burst through the noise, it would have to be someone pretty famous. If it's Reese Witherspoon, I think, that has an amazing book club now. You know what I mean? If she happens to get her hands on an advance copy, or but having, even in the business world, if you're writing a business book, having somebody who's recognized in the business world, the book Ape comes to my mind, the author, publisher, entrepreneur by Guy Kawasaki. And so if he, speaks to your book, like if you're writing a book on publishing or authors as entrepreneurs, and he loves that book, that's certainly going to get attention. But I'm not sure that it might get your foot in the door, but unless it's a really well-written book, that's really your gold. But getting your foot in the door with that high profile, review or blurb, book blurb is really key, and also opens you up to their audience as well.
Is key. So I don't know. You can always say, Dr. Jacalyn, in your next book, buy this book, in quotes, Oprah Winfrey, because we talked about Oprah with Anne before the program. And if anybody asks, just say, oh, no, the other Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
the one from Columbus, Ohio.
The one in the air quotes.
Yeah, I did
Tony
send
Robbins, Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah,
They all love
my
your book.
novels. Yeah. You just never know. You have to just try, and you just never know.
And you did do that. You said
Yes.
you sent a couple of pieces that you wrote out to Ellen and Oprah.
To Ellen and Oprah, yeah. If you're listening.
Well, and
on an envelope under the thing. And I always say to people, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Wonky Donkey.
No.
This
Sounds
was
interesting.
a book written years ago that had been out of print forever. And one day, this Scottish grandmother was reading the Wonky Donkey to her 2-year-old grandson. And it's a very, very funny book. And so she started chuckling with page 1, and then like Wonky Donkey has like a wobbly eye and 3 legs. And so it's one of those, it builds on itself. And so each page is more about, and she was laughing so hard, she couldn't get the story out. The Scottish grandmother, that video went viral. And they brought it back, and Scholastic reprinted billions of copies or whatever. So one of my clients at that point says to me, Anne, we need a viral video.
Don't we all?
Right? I don't have a Scottish accent, and I'll try.
Yeah, and a follow-up question I have is, of those 3 routes to market, are any of them guaranteed to make you money, or are they all basically, what's the terminology I'm looking for? I'm not going to use it. Rolling the dice. Rolling the
Lost
dice.
leaders.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, there really are no guarantees. And that's one of the first questions that I ask a new author that wants to work with me is why are you writing this book? If the answer is to make $1 million and to be famous,
Mhm.
you know, I try and manage expectations as best I can, but there is so much out there. And I mean, the very, very least is to write a good book, you know, write a book that people want to read, write a book that has, you know, a twist that maybe, you know, you haven't seen yourself. Um, you know, and when I look at the different models,
Mhm.
you know, the return on the per book sales, depending on, you know, in a traditional publishing contract, you may get an advance. And then typically the royalties that will be paid against that advance are about 10%, you know, of sales after expenses and so on. The model that I use, because you know, the author is investing in the process. You know, in the contract is a 70-30 split. So the author gets the higher percentage, but the volume probably isn't going to be as high as someone who's selling from a traditional sense. So does it all come out in the wash? You know, depending on the book, depending on, you know, the marketing. You know, I know people who have published traditionally, and you know, the first, and it's like any path you choose, the first few months there's going to be a splash. You know, we've been fortunate enough that most of the books that I've published have wound up, you know, on the Amazon hot seller list, you know, or high in rankings of a certain category. But that changes from minute to minute, and once those sales, you know, drop a little bit, you know, the next, you know, hot title takes the place. So you don't maintain that level. You know, as things lower, as the sales lower, your rankings drop. So I guess the long way around answering your question is there's no pathway to publishing that guarantees more or less money. You know, some self-publishers make a lot of money, and of course they keep all of the you know, the income. You know, there's no cost sharing, but I think what's also misunderstood is at every part in the distribution process somebody has to take a cut. People get upset about that, but it's business. So if you have whatever distribution network you're using, whether it's Amazon, Ingram, people are working to make that channel function. So there are salaries that need to be paid. There's paper that has to be, you know, purchased in the printing and so on and so forth. So every part of that process, somebody gets a cut. And so you might think, oh my gosh, I'm selling my book for, you know, $24.99 and I get $2 a book. You might want to revisit the, you know, the paper quality, the thickness, but you don't want to sacrifice too much quality. So, and the shipping can be expensive, and there's a lot of complexity that goes into whatever distribution channel you're using. Or, you know, if you're using Ingram, for example, I'm in Canada, but my authors are from all over the world. But if you're shipping something, you know, from a US printer into Canada, the cost for shipping might make it undoable because you can't put your book price up high enough to make a profit, and so you're priced out of the market. So there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of phases, but that's, I mean, I help people sort of through that process, making those decisions. And sometimes it's a great idea, especially if you're doing the back of room sales and things of that nature, to have a local printer who is an expert in printing books, and have some books just shipped directly to you. So then the cost is finite. You've got your books, it's been shipped to you, and then you bring them to, either you can do consignment in stores or back of room, and then there's no other middle person. But that can be time consuming and unappealing to a lot of people.
Well, you just outlined a whole bunch of reasons why somebody who's thinking about heading down this road ought to call you first. So I'm hoping they will, because an awful lot of people, I think, engage in magical thinking when it comes to a project like this, where somehow magically it's just all going to come together. And I think as soon as you make that assumption, you pretty much identified for yourself that you're never going to get to the top of that mountain. It's magically going to put you there.
Yeah.
But it's a climb that you have to make, and you know all the steps. That's why they should call you.
It's attainable, and if you are like I am, like a tech nerd, and I love the minutia of all of that. So when I get into a new platform, like I dig around. I love data entry. Like, most people are like, oh my God, you're nuts, right? So you have to love that stuff, because sometimes the title setup, and Jacalyn, you can probably speak to this, because in KDP is a little more intuitive, Kindle Direct Publishing.
Right.
I publish through Ingram Spark because it's a wider distribution channel, but it's not intuitive, and you can kind of get bogged down. But as I said, I do self-publishing coaching, and sometimes somebody really grabs onto it. So it might take a couple hours, and I would charge hourly, and then they're off and running. Some people after a couple of sessions say, no, let's do this, partner. I don't want to do this. You take it.
I do have a couple of comments to add to that based on my own experience. So my book, the book that's out now, is $19.99, and I think it's $8.01 from that. So they do take a big piece of it. And the other thing is that a lot of my understanding, again, being #1 bestseller, you go on Amazon and you just have to keep watching where your book is. And if you happen to see it, it says #1 for that
Grab that
second.
screenshot.
Get the screenshot. Yes. So, but here's something that I think it's kind of, I don't want to say unfair because that's judging, but it was something I didn't know, that if you can send out electronic copies of your book and people can write a review.
Yes.
But you can only have your review count under certain circumstances. So you have to have an Amazon account, and you have to spend, and I'm just throwing this number out. I think this is $50. $50
at like top. Yeah.
Yes, or it doesn't count. Yeah. And then because they did this to 3 of my family members, if they assess or somehow find out that they're family because of the same last name, they don't count. Yeah. So I had a number of people that I bought the electronic copy and I sent it out, and they didn't get any credit. So yeah. So
and they changed. I mean, the algorithms, there was a time that, there was so much out there about how to kind of game the algorithm, but they keep finding out how people are doing it, and then a lot of people do review swaps, and I think it's okay, but you don't want to say that you've done a review swap with another author, because that's verboten, So.
Yeah, you want it to be authentic, really, because I know there's even sites I was told about that you can hire people to go and do, like, no, I want people to read the book and actually find it to be of value. So, so I think based on everything we've discussed, it makes so much more sense to work with you, and then, as Al said, to go down this journey into the darkness of the unknown.
A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people love it, and and it's like anything. Once you learn how to use it, I mean, think about when you first started to learn this broadcast platform, and my goodness, like, you just snowballed. So it's once you have the formula. Things change, like, from day to day, that's for sure, because it's, people will ask me about KDP, and I haven't used it in several years. So I said, well, it has changed a lot since I published on KDP. So just, got to stay on top of it. So, I don't want to discourage people from trying, but it also, I'm happy to give people guidance and take the reins if it makes sense.
That's great. Real quick, something I'd throw out there. When I try to explain what it is I do, which is branding culture alignment, I tend to go into the technical aspects of it, and people's eyes tend to glaze over. So if I wrote a book that way, I'd end up with a book that nobody really wanted to read. It would just be too dry. Now, I know you said that OC Publishing is just children's books and a couple of other genres, but I'm thinking to myself, an awful lot of business books ought to be written as children's books. The fundamentals are so simple.
Yep.
And if you explain it to somebody the way a child would understand it, they'll get it better and faster.
I actually it's funny you say that. And children's book, it seems like I publish a lot of children's books, but memoir is a close second, and women's fiction. And if I ever get to writing more of my mysteries, but I had a gentleman contact me. It was somebody I knew when I lived in Florida, and he is a cybersecurity consultant. But he does a lot of corporate training, and he has young kids, and said, I have an idea for children's story, but I want to turn it into like a corporate training. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's a really good idea. Yeah, look at you. So it's right. And I always said, because I have a early childhood education background as well. And people say, all the things that I learned to live life, I learned in the sandbox. So, I revert back to a lot of my psychology training.
I know we're coming up on the end of the program. Send me some dates. Let's get together and talk about this.
Sure, absolutely.
I just want to share this. You both gave me a fabulous idea for a children's book that can then be turned into corporate training. Thank you both. Big kisses to both of you.
Yes. Awesome.
Yes.
It all starts with Once Upon a Time.
Exactly.
Once upon a time. Yes. Excellent.
Oh, wonderful.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it on the air, but I'll tell you guys afterwards. So, Anne, we have been scrolling your information, but for people listening on the radio, what's the best way to get in touch with you? And a question I don't usually ask, which is, what kind of offerings do you have for the audience? So in other words, if they want to work with you, do they have to have a certain amount of money put aside, or are there you get paid by the hour? Like, just more information for our audience, because I'm sure people want to know.
Sure. And my website is www.ocpublishing.ca or .com. Both will get you to my main website. As I said, I have two pathways to publishing. One is the partner publishing, whereby there's, it could be anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, depending on the type of book you're writing. But that's phased in, and there's in the initial discussions and manuscript review, there's no upfront money, and it billed as the process continues. So it could be up to a year that amount is spread over. The coaching that I do for manuscript mentoring or self-publishing coaching, I bill by the hour. It's $50 an hour, and like I said, some people learn really quick, and it might take maybe 2 or 3 hours, and some prefer to do a monthly, maybe twice a month session, an hour or two. So that's it in a nutshell, pretty much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really helpful. So I think Al and I will both be reaching out to you.
Are you kidding? Absolutely.
As soon as the show is over, we're going backstage. All right. Thank you so much, Anne. If you wait for us backstage, we both want to chat with you.
Thanks, Anne. Great.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Another genius show. Fantastic questions.
I thought it was great. I think I learned a lot. I don't know. And I think, when you're all finished with it, I think a lot of people start in a preconceived silo of what they think this whole process is. They start with a product that they've seen before, and they try to replicate that. But with a little bit of creativity, I think you can step outside that silo and come up with a terrific, novel, interesting, engaging product that differentiates you from all the other authors. And I think it's good that there are people around like Anne to help you shape visions like that.
I do too. And thank you for bringing out all of that wonderful information that she had to share. So appreciate you as an excellent interviewer. Thank you, Al.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure working with you and great guests like Anne.
Absolutely. I'm going to scroll your banner and I'm going to spotlight you and tell us who should reach out to you and what they can expect by working with you.
Well, if you're an organization that's coming up on the end of the year or looking to launch the new year with a team building exercise, Instead of sending your people out to learn how to make pizzas, or sending your people out to play paintball, or sending everybody out to go bowling, you might want to consider a very accelerated way of building a team around the purpose of your organization. More than just interacting with each other, we provide a meaningful 3-step experience that arranges everybody's mindsets around the purpose that they share as members of your team. And the result of it is a higher level of engagement and better productivity and happier, healthier. I can't begin to tell you that, especially these days, the importance of culture in terms of maintaining a healthy workplace. Mental health is such a big issue these days, especially in the workplace. The way you do that, in our experience, is you align people around the purpose they serve, get them excited about it, and that's what we do. So reach out, al.cini@getbcat, getbcat.com, and let's get a conversation started.
And thank you, Al. And where can we see you on RVN television?
RVN television, morning coffee on Friday mornings at 7 a.m. Eastern time. I get up at the crack of dawn for that. That's fun. And I also host a program on RVN television. That's rvntelevision.com, called CEO Chat. That's on Fridays at 10:30.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. You have to get Ann on over there as well. So,
Great.
yeah. All right. Bye, everyone. It's so nice having you here today. Al and I are going to come right back with Hyatt Ives for the Listening Mentor Show. So we'll see you in a few minutes. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you again, Ann. We're looking forward to chatting with you. And I think that's it. Anything else, Al?
I think that covers it.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.